punk revolution now. Today we're reviewing Bjork. I'm just kidding. Bjork. Bjork. Sounds like Bazinga Amongus. Today we're reviewing Bjork. Hold up, this is funny. Today we're reviewing Bjork's album Amongus. No. Bazinga's album Among Us. Just kidding. Bjork's album Fungus. Flower. Fossora. Alrighty, enough with the epic jokes. Let's talk about Bjork. Bjork is an Icelandic pop star who makes experimental pop and such. She's a genius! One of the most epic artists of all time, literally. Her discography is so big and full of so much epic experimentation going back to the 90s, and how is she still releasing amazing music after decades of being epic? Well, that and more coming soon in the review. Let's talk about her new album. First, we're going to take a look at her album cover. 3, 2, 1... This to me is a classic freaking Bjork album cover because you have Bjork featured in this blue kind of funky little, I don't know, outfit. She looks like a princess or something. I feel like Bjork is always wearing funky outfits in her album artwork. And that bright blue kind of like icy color contrasts a ton with the setting she's in, which is like all these like kind of fungal flowers and stuff, which look like vaginas. If you look at the little flowers, some of them look like buttholes and vaginas, which is very Bjork. Bjork is the type of artist to like really like doing little jokes and stuff, because she's epic and she's a feminist who loves vaginas. And she's proud of her vagina. Bjork is the type of musician to proudly say the word vagina, because we can destigmatize the word vagina. Everybody, say vagina! And it's cool, the contrast between the bright blue, which is a very kind of like artificial, pretty, gorgeous, kind of funky dress, and then the colors of brown and red and very nature-y, vagina-y kind of area she's sitting. And I feel like that really captures this album musically really well, because spoiler alert, this album is such a complex, perplexing blend of artificial electronic bassiness and aggressive, like almost EDM influenced percussion, like literally like boom, 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 like very abrasive, like You know, she's been collaborating a lot with Arca in the past decade, and you can't help but wonder if Arca's kind of weird industrial EDM electronic noise stuff has had an impact on Bjork wanting to incorporate some of that in her own music. But of course, there's no doubt that Bjork has influenced Arca, and they both collaborated and share ideas. That's the type of thing we're getting, though. You got that artificial electronic stuff, but then so much of this album just is so, like, organic sounding, organic like a freaking mushroom, because this is Bjork doing a mushroom songs about mushrooms and fungus, and it's very like medieval fantasy, kind of like chamber music, like a medieval chamber, you know, opera or something with like strings and flutes and choral opera, like whoa. That's a really cool contrast. I love that kind of avant-garde chamber music thing she's doing and blending it so well with electronic music. That is a hard thing to do, but of course, if anyone's capable of doing it, it's Bjork. Bjork has done similar stuff throughout her discography, experimenting with electronic stuff, experimenting with more strings and flutes and stuff, and here she is combining it brilliantly in this album. And what stood out to me immediately in this album is not only is she bringing these very contradictory sounds together, but she's putting it together in a very dissonant way. Like that song, like the opening track, Atopos, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Atopos, whatever, it's just like repeating this kind of chord progression and melody instrumentally that's just so freaking dissonant. It's like it just doesn't sit well with you. It's so dissonant, but it's like you can't help but be fascinated by the fact that somehow over this dissonant like melody throughout the song, and then beneath it you have this like very abrasive percussion pounding through. Somehow on top of that, even though you have this like really dissonant canvas, somehow Bjork is able to sing beautifully on top of it, like a beautiful fairy princess. That to me is like, it just drives home this like kind of fungus, mushroom, medieval fantasy atmosphere that Bjork has done a fantastic job creating. Like mushrooms are dissonant and like abrasive, and nature is kind of like dark and dirty and abrasive. There's a lot of like dirtiness and abrasiveness musically with the canvas here, and then you have Bjork just, I don't know, like the amount of talent required to have an instrumental canvas as abrasive and confusing as a lot of these songs, and then Bjork to like just like, ooh, she's like a fairy, she's like a beautiful fairy floating through the forest, and the forest is spooky and scary and dirty and fungi, but Bjork is your guiding light, and Bjork is coming in and singing beautiful lyrics about hope and love and her ovules, is that a word? Her eggs, and her mom passing away. It's just like kind of like this beautiful theme of being in touch with her family, her ancestress, whatever that means. A beautiful song. The lyrics are just phenomenal. Singing about her mom passing away, that is just phenomenal. You're combining this like connection with your family and your connection to the planet Earth. And we could look at the album cover. It's like I said, like you see Bjork in this dress, this bright blue dress, sticking out like a sore thumb, like she's the beautiful fairy in this world of like dirty fungus vaginas, which are beautiful also. So that's kind of what's going on in this album. I again want to reiterate how interesting and incredibly talented Bjork is for combining these different genres. Like, sometimes it's very organic sounding with like kind of chamber pop strings and flutes and chorus, like choral music, like as if you're at like a medieval opera. Sometimes it has like industrial, like a lot of like this percussion is abrasive, like industrial music. Kind of, to me, it feels like she's approaching this album with the mindset that maybe like a 70s like avant-prog rock and opposition artist would, where they're just like really trying to create something very, very experimental and like intentionally supposed to be like challenging and difficult to listen to. But then of course somehow Bjork is able to sing beautifully on top of it. Bjork has always been like an incredibly talented artist. I think this is the first album I've ever reviewed of Bjork's though, where like I'm forced to just sit and analyze and think and be like, holy crap, this shouldn't be possible to combine all these genres together. And then it has some of these rhythms kind of have like a reggaeton kind of beat to it. So of course, that's why I'm thinking Arca. If you're having like industrial pounding, noisy percussion that's like EDM that kind of has a little bit of reggaeton, like Latino influence in there, it's Arca influence coming through in there too. So, what the fudge? And throughout this album, sometimes you're gonna get like a 4, 5, 6 minute song where it's a very epic, powerful, lyrically powerful, beautiful song with just a fascinating, like the way the like flutes and strings might kind of come over here, and then over here you'll hear like a thumping sound, like a very, very intricate, big 5-minute songs, 6-minute songs, and then you might have a song here that's like a minute and a half, 1 minute, that's like just like a weird little experimentation. I love the song Mycelia, which I think that's how you pronounce it, Mycelia, whatever, Bjork is coming up with words because she's like Dr. Seuss creative like that, just a weirdo genius. And the song might just be completely only like synths or just vocal pieces, vocal samples that are like sometimes here actually, it's really strange because like I've already mentioned it, the way that it comes together with the organic instruments and the strange abrasive electronic. Sometimes I feel like I'm listening to like a One O Tricks Point Never album or like Garden of Delete or something like that, because sometimes One O Tricks Point Never, even though One O Tricks Point Never is like completely in the electronic category, you can just tell with the way he's experimenting with these different synths and stuff and like bringing in choral synths, is trying to create something avant-garde and magical. I feel like Bjork is going with that same mindset. It's been 5 years since Bjork has released an album, and 5 years is a long time to release an album, but listening to this album, it makes sense why it would take 5 years to create something like this, because the amount of detail and complexity is just overwhelming. Speaking of 5, Anthony Fantano gave this album a 5, which is, how do I put this? That's misogynistic! That's the only reason you could give an album this complex and beautiful and thoughtful a 5. Although I will say, it frankly is, even though there's a lot of amazing moments throughout this record, it is a challenging listen. Like, this is not, you're not going to have very many melodies that you walk out of this album singing to your head. It's a 55-minute album. Yes, a lot of Bjork albums are pretty long and quite challenging. I feel like this one is especially challenging, but maybe it's just because I've been listening to it a lot, and I don't know, it's really strange that Bjork is so, like, popular. I mean, she's always been really popular, but I feel like she's having, like, on Instagram and stuff, maybe because she just released this album, like, a revival in popularity, like, being memed a lot, like, a lot of, like, epic memes about Bjork. She's a memeable person, but really, her music is so freaking abrasive and experimental, and this album really sums it up. And Anthony Fantano's not smart enough to understand it. So, I don't know, even though I'm laying down, listening, and just fascinated intellectually and analytically by this album, and very moved by a lot of these lyrics, there's no doubt it's a challenging record. People like Anthony Fantano are not going to be able to grasp it, and even people like myself who do grasp it, there are times where you're listening to it like, oh my goodness, this is a lot to take in. There's so many like that it does get quite, I don't know, exhausting to listen to. I wish there was a little bit more kind of moments of relief from the experimentation to kind of help you get through the album. That is actually a little bit of a flaw. Like, it's like so engaged in so much in-depth, intense experimentation that it's a little hard to listen to sometimes. So that's a flaw, honestly. You know, you gotta, like, there's a part of music that just has to be frankly enjoyable, and this record is very enjoyable, but not always enjoyable, because it's like reading a nonfiction book. It's like, wow, I'm having my mind blown by these facts, but I'm a little tired because my brain needs a second to breathe, because Bjork, you're too smart for me, you're throwing too much epicness at me. So I'm giving this a 7.9 out of 10. Freaking dope album. We have a freaking epic Bjork album this year. Unless you're someone who's a misogynist like Anthony Fantano, you have to admit that Bjork is a genius. That's the only way you can possibly write songs that combine so many contradictory elements and make it so dissonant, and then somehow on top of it sing on top of it like a beautiful fairy. Bjork is from a different universe. Like, I know I'm not the first person to say that, but like, this album I feel like really nails it down. Like, holy crap, how did she, like, she could have just stopped, she could have retired a long time ago and we'd all appreciate her as a genius. But she gave us another freaking brilliant, epic, very thoughtful, very emotional, experimental album, very creative. That's my review. Feels good to be back to reviewing music. There's so many albums I missed the past month because of my surgery stuff. I want to get to all of it. I'm probably gonna have to miss reviewing some of these some big releases that came out the past month. I know it's sad, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I can do a video where I just briefly talk about a bunch of albums I missed. Who knows? Anywho, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Always appreciate it. Anthony Fantano, you need to apologize to all the women in the world that you hurt by giving this album a 5. I gave it a fair, honest score of 7.9. You reduced your score by 3 points because you have mental issues and you went through a divorce and now you hate women. That's my theorem. Thanks for watching. Punk Revolution now!